So let's talk about fabric for the Trailblazer quilt. So I have a scrappy pack. So this is something that I purchased online, and some of the fabrics do match as far as like the prints go. They're just in a different colorway. So anything like this would totally work, or you can make your own. So let's talk about how to get our fabric out of the stash that we already have. So for this quilt, you are going to need kind of your base scraps. And so this is my pile of my base scraps. These are the collections that I have. They are all different kinds of prints, all different kinds of colors. They have very similar tones. I would call these like medium tones. A lot of them have color on color, or just tiny print. They're not super busy, but they just go along together really well. As you can see, like this, I dug through my stash and popped it in here so it doesn't quite go, but I love a fun color or a pop of color. Same with this kind of teal in here. So you're going to really look around in your stash and find those colors and those fabrics that you think will kind of go well together. So no matter where they come from or what fabric line, they all kind of read the same tone. Maybe they have simple designs. I did push or put this yellow in here as well, which is really fun. It's got kind of a copper metal fleck in it, so it stands out just a little bit, but it still runs along those same color lines that I have already going. So that's first, is dig through your stash and find those like tones, similar prints. If you go with anything with a print, any size of print is fine. So the majority of the quilt is around 2.5 inch to 4 inch strips. And so it looks like from what I chose, they're all smaller prints except for a few. But, you know, feel free to dig through your fabrics, just find a collection that you really like, add some more fun pieces just for the pop of color, and add more variety in the prints. So that's what you're going to do for the majority of the quilt. Now, in the quilt, we also have some background colors. And so for mine, I did choose a few that one had kind of a busy print on it. I also chose a background that didn't have much of a print on it. And here's another one which just has kind of a small, really thin pencil line print on it. Just watch the tone of these. So as you can see, I've got a variety of creams, which is just fine. So the one in the center is just a little bit lighter than the other, but they all kind of read the same. This is a little busy, but I didn't mind it because it works in some of the larger borders that are in the quilt. I also chose another print for a background that I used for some of the borders as well. Now this one had a gray, it has more of a gray tone to it versus a light. And you'll be able to see that in the quilt. So I'll show that in a minute. But don't think that you have to stick to like all white or all cream. Some variety in your background colors really is totally fine. Another piece that I used, this is in the borders, as well as I did do some of the piano keys and things like that to kind of make it move around the quilt. But this is a lighter print compared to the scraps that I used. Let me dig through my pile here. So this is quite light compared to the scraps that I used. And so it gives a nice tone off of it, whereas these are mediums to darks. This reads as a light, so that is just fine as well. So you can see I've got my gray in here, and then I've got kind of a really light colored along with my scraps. In some parts of the quilt, mostly in the borders, but then I did pop a few pieces in other areas as well. I used a dark, like a black color with a very small print. It's got like just little plus signs or stars. And then I also have this, which is similar to it, but it's more of a blue color and also just different stars prints on it. So you are going to need a few darks to go in on your quilt. This gives a great contrast. It also allows like stop borders, so places of rest for your eyes. But the majority of it is really from your scraps pieces. You know, as you sew along, feel free to add to this pile and just mix and match the colors and the fabrics that you have. I just wanted to show off a few of the spots where, oh, and I didn't talk about my background. So in the quilt, I've got a background for the center block as well as a background for the four corners of the finished quilt. And so for this background, I used a kind of a linen style fabric. So I'll show that. A grunge would work, or really any kind of background that you have for that area. Just know that it's a great place. I'll grab my center. So this is a great place to show off some quilting when the quilt gets finished. It's not super big, but just large enough. I personally wanted some kind of print or design in the fabric, so I went with this kind of gray color that has a linen style to it. I didn't want it a solid or plain, but really feel free to use what you have. So, you know, just a reminder, your background on the center is going to be kind of a darker color, and then we run into our borders. So this is the border where I used my light gray. And then you can also see that I've used kind of the busy background in here, in some of the diamonds. And then I also have used kind of a tan color background versus the more white or off-white background. So even though the quilt is quite scrappy, and it's a great place to use your scraps, that doesn't mean it needs to be chaotic. And so as you can see from the center block, that I have two fabrics that I've used for the center that I rotate or alternate with. Then I've used kind of a yellowy background for surrounding the center star. I also have used, you know, this teal color repeated throughout, as well as the blue background, and then the white or the cream color background with the blue flower print on it. And then I did the points in an orange color, and again, that linen style background. So all of these are from the scraps that I had, and you know, feel free to play around with the design and the colors that you use. Just know that you don't have to use a different fabric for each of these teal colors. If you wanted to, that would be fine, but it is kind of fun to also, within the scraps, have it repeated throughout. So I've got my gray border right here, and then we move on to the piano keys border. So in the piano keys, I went ahead and I used some of the background, as you can see here. I also used that lighter green or blue color in here. And this other background that had like the pencil thin drawing. My corner fabric repeats this fabric that I used for the background of the Lemoyne Star. And then all of these other ones are just a collection of the fabric scrap pile that I began with. I don't have any of these repeating as far as like orange, blue, red, yellow. So they are just randomly sewn together. In fact, this is the wrong side of the fabric now that I'm looking at it now, because this is the same as this fabric, but it's reading just a little bit lighter. So I guess really don't be afraid of turning your fabric over and using the wrong side of it as well. So for our first border, which is kind of what it's wider than this next one, I did use the same off-white with blue flower design on it. If you don't have a strip long enough for this measurement, feel free to just sew your strips together until you have the correct measurement. So even within these, in my quilt, I do use one fabric for that border all the way around. But if you need to piece something together, then by all means do that. So as you can see, I just repeated the same fabric. And then same with these next ones. So if you don't have enough, just piece this border. In the corner piece right here, I've used a different background, so it's not matchy-matchy with this, but if you want to, go ahead. Then I've got this dark, so I did use the black with the little stars for this border. And it kind of serves as a stop border for your eyes. So this can be a lot of fabric and a lot of patterns and a lot of colors. And having these little borders really does help with the movement of the eye and settle things down. Now with the triangle or the 60-degree triangles in this border, again, I just repeated the same fabrics that I had in the piano keys border. No rhyme or reason. I did not follow anything that was like all the ones with the points down are light, all the points up are dark. I didn't follow any of those rules. I just made sure that if there was a repeated fabric that they didn't touch. And so I just went with that. And again, this corner I did match to the background of the Lemoyne Star again. So this does help again with the scrappy and the overwhelm of the fabrics and the colors. So I've got this fabric down in the Lemoyne Star. I've got it as a corner block in the piano keys border. And then I have it as the corner block of the triangle border. So, you know, even though this is scrappy, feel free to grab fabric that you can repeat throughout the quilt. It gives it some uniform and makes it very cohesive and work together really nicely. So let's look on the outside corner. So I'm just calling these italic, like stacked bricks, because they are stacked brick blocks, but they are on an angle. So we're just going to call them italic at this point. All of these repeat those same fabrics that I used in the triangle borders as well as the piano keys. So everything in here is repeated. Again, I just made sure nothing was touching if it was the same. I've got kind of that darker blue as my stop border out here and a black. So this black continues down as well as goes across and frames the outside 4 blocks. This background piece is repeated from the center. I'm kind of questioning that, so I I've auditioned a few different pieces and thought maybe this gray or even that light blue would have looked really nice right here, or even that gray color. So kind of play around with your fabrics before you cut them up. So, but yeah, I didn't do that. I had just decided I'm just going to use this. And now that I look at it, I'm like, ooh, maybe I could have had some fun with a little bit of a different color and not repeating that fabric again. I did use that fabric in the background. So all of these tiny triangles on the edges of these italic stacked bricks are the background, but I did use a variety of them as well. So just kind of mix and match those. I wasn't too worried if I used them on both ends or one end or if they were touching, because it is just the background. As far as the 5 patch goes, so it's like a 5x5 block right here in the corner. And then we have these 2 extensions or kind of stems coming off of it. There is this fun little triangle right here. So instead of repeating any of the colors in here, I went with the light orange, and then I popped that teal back in here that I used in the center Lemoyne star, which I think is going to be a lot of fun. So with these, I made them really matchy-matchy, but I'm thinking again, I probably could have mixed up some of the fabrics in here and really had some fun just exploring more of the scrappy look to it instead of being identical on both sides. So, and just because I have red here and blue here doesn't mean that you can't play with this. So if you don't love red and you love green and you want to stick that in there instead, or a yellow, by all means, replace any of these colors that you see with the scraps that you have. And again, you know, as with any rule, when you're using scraps, if you don't have the fabric enough to repeat, just find one that is similar in color and similar in value, and it will be just fine. Again, if you don't have enough fabric for all 4 corners, then feel free to mix and match. And if this is too large of a square, piece something together. So, you know, this is kind of a larger block and it does eat up quite a bit of fabric, which would require a larger scrap. So if you need, you know, just sew a bunch of fabrics together and then square that out. So I'll show you an example. So if I had this fabric and then I've got, you know, another piece that is like this size. So I can sew these 2 together, but it's not quite as wide as I need. I can grab another piece of fabric and sew it to the outside. Then I can go ahead and cut this piece to the size that it says and put my Dresden plate on top of that. That just adds interest to your quilt. It makes it really scrappy, super cute. So scrappy background pieces for those blocks, those larger 4-corner blocks, would totally be fine and would be a lot of fun. And it would make a great way to use up kind of maybe smaller pieces of fabric that you have laying around that you can sew together to make what you actually need. So that is a quick look at all of the fabrics and picking fabrics, going through your stash. Again, any of these borders, if you don't have pieces that are long enough, feel free to sew your strips together to make those happen. If you don't have enough pieces to like repeat here, all the way around your quilt, then use your scrappies that that all kind of read the same tone, the same colorway, and the same value. So good luck searching through your fabrics. Have fun, and just know that anything you choose right now can be changed later. So as you start sewing these blocks and putting this quilt together, watching that those pieces become larger, you can make any kind of adjustments you need along the way.